Have you ever noticed how two people can walk into the same room, yet experience two completely different worlds? One lights up with excitement, moving from group to group, drawing energy from every conversation. The other feels a tightening in the chest, a quiet exhaustion, as if each interaction chips away at their strength. This is not merely a matter of liking people or not. Carl Jung believed it reflected something far deeper. Two fundamental attitudes of the human psyche: introversion and extraversion. These were not surface traits, but deep orientations of energy, patterns through which life itself is experienced. Jung's first insight into these two attitudes emerged as he observed patients, colleagues, and his own inner conflicts. He noticed how some individuals seemed to retreat naturally into their inner worlds, preferring reflection, memory, and imagination over external action. Others were propelled outward into activity, relationships, and events, as though their vitality only truly came alive when facing the world outside. He named these two directions of energy flow, introversion and extraversion. To Jung, these terms were not judgments, nor were they categories to trap people inside boxes. They were ways of describing how energy circulates through us. He often compared the psyche to a living organism, like a plant, one that sometimes bends toward the sun and at other times curls inward to protect itself in shadow. Introverts bend inward toward the soil of the self, drawing nourishment from within. Extroverts stretch outward toward the light, thriving on the external environment. Both tendencies are necessary, both valid, and both universal. Imagine Jung in his study, surrounded by old books and mythological texts. He was a man deeply attuned to his own introverted processes, endlessly reflecting on dreams, symbols, and the unconscious. Yet he was also a public figure, giving lectures, engaging in debates, and building a network of students and followers. Within himself, he wrestled with these two streams of energy, at times exhausted by too much social engagement, at times restless if cut off from the outside world. His discovery of these two attitudes did not come from theory alone, but from the living paradox he embodied. When Jung first introduced these terms in his 1921 work, Psychological Types, he was responding to a question that still haunts us today. Why do people respond so differently to the same situation? Why does one person find joy in noise while another withers? Why does one seek depth in solitude, while another craves stimulation and company? Jung's answer was simple yet profound. Our psychic energy is oriented differently. For some, the primary orientation flows inward, toward thought and reflection. For others, it flows outward, toward action and engagement. This may sound like common sense to us now, living in a world saturated with personality quizzes and social media labels. But in Jung's time, this was revolutionary. The dominant psychology of the early 20th century sought universal laws, applying one model to all human beings. Jung dared to say that people are not all energized in the same way. Each of us carries a distinct attitude of the psyche, shaping how we feel alive, how we work, and how we love. Consider the metaphor of breath. Extraversion is like inhaling, taking in the world, drawing energy from outside sources, expanding with what is around us. Introversion is like exhaling, releasing into the inner atmosphere, retreating into one's own lungs of memory, thought, and reflection. Both are necessary for life, and yet each of us has a dominant rhythm, a pattern that feels more natural. Jung was careful, however, not to reduce people into fixed types. He insisted that no one is purely introverted or purely extroverted. Each of us has both tendencies, just as each breath requires both inhalation and exhalation. What matters is where the psychic energy prefers to rest. He called this the attitude of the personality, Not in the modern sense of mood, but in the sense of orientation, the direction in which life tends to flow. This orientation, Jung observed, was not trivial. It affected everything from the way we think and feel to the kinds of relationships we seek and the kinds of environments that sustain us. It even colored our spiritual life, shaping whether we find the divine within the silence of contemplation or in the communal chorus of ritual. Jung's insight was that introversion and extraversion were not surface traits, but fundamental attitudes, built into the very architecture of the psyche. For those who heard Jung describe these concepts, it often felt like someone had finally put words to an experience they had always felt but never articulated. The introvert suddenly realized that their exhaustion in crowds was not weakness or shyness, but simply a natural orientation of energy. The extrovert discovered that their craving for social interaction was not superficiality, but an authentic need to engage with life externally. Jung gave language to these deep instincts, freeing people from the shame of comparison. Jung's first insight into these twin attitudes marked the beginning of a journey that would transform psychology. From this foundation, he would go on to develop an entire system of personality, integrating the four functions of thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition with the attitudes of introversion and extraversion. Out of this work, the seeds of the modern MBTI were sown, but before we reach those later developments, we must linger with Jung's discovery itself, the recognition that the psyche bends in two directions, inward and outward, each with its own mystery. This was not merely a psychological observation. It was, in Jung's hands, almost spiritual. He saw humanity reflected in ancient myths, where heroes often had to journey both into the underworld and out into the wide world. He saw it in alchemy, where the process of transformation required both dissolution inward and expansion outward. For Jung, introversion and extraversion were archetypal movements of the soul, as old as human history itself. As we continue, we will step more deeply into the inner world, following the stream of the introvert, the quiet path where energy turns inward, seeking depth rather than breadth. To understand this is to see how Jung's theory lives not only in books, but in the very way people experience their own souls. To picture the introverted attitude, imagine a deep well hidden within a quiet forest. From the surface, little seems to move. Leaves stir gently in the breeze, but the water inside is still, clear, and profoundly deep. The introvert is much like this well, calm on the outside, but filled with an entire world beneath the surface. Jung described introversion as an inward flow of psychic energy, a turning away from external objects toward the rich and layered interior of the mind. Introverts, in Jung's view, are not antisocial, nor are they incapable of engaging with the outside world. Instead, their natural rhythm is to retreat into themselves to restore energy. For them, solitude is not an escape from life, but a return home. In the quiet, in the familiar silence of thought, they draw strength. It is in these inward spaces that they reflect, process, and weave meaning from the events of the day. Imagine an introvert at a dinner party. They arrive with curiosity, willing to engage, but after a handful of conversations, they feel the weight of fatigue pressing upon them. It is not that they dislike people. It is that every interaction requires energy flowing outward, and the well of their inner world begins to run low. What they crave is a chance to step outside, to breathe in the night air, or to return home to the stillness of a book, a journal, or simply their own reflections. There, the balance is restored, and the well begins to refill. Jung compared this inward movement to a seed buried in soil. While unseen from the surface, a seed contains immense potential, and it is in darkness that growth occurs. Introverts often carry this quiet potential. They may appear withdrawn, yet within their inner landscape ideas germinate, insights form, and creativity flows. Some of history's greatest thinkers, artists, and spiritual leaders embodied this attitude, not because they avoided the world, but because they first sought meaning within before sharing it outwardly. Consider the poet Emily Dickinson, who rarely left her home, yet created a body of work that touches souls across centuries. Or Albert Einstein, who was known to spend long hours in silent thought before offering theories that reshaped the world. These are introverted patterns, the willingness to look inward, to trust that the deepest truths may not lie in the noise of the marketplace, but in the solitude of the heart. For Jung, the introverted attitude also meant that perception of the world is filtered through the inner subject. While an extrovert might focus directly on an object, say, a beautiful painting, the introvert focuses on what the painting stirs inside of them, the emotions, associations, and symbols it awakens. Reality is always touched by the inner lens, and so their life is more shaped by personal impressions than by external facts. This does not mean introverts cannot act decisively or engage with the real world. Rather, their primary source of guidance is the inner compass, the quiet voice of thought and intuition that points the way. Yet Jung warned that introversion, like any psychic attitude, can become unbalanced. Too much withdrawal may turn into isolation, where the individual becomes trapped within the labyrinth of their own mind. The well that once nurtured may grow stagnant, darkened by overthinking and doubt. In such cases, the introvert risks losing touch with the vitality of the outer world, forgetting that life also requires contact, exchange, and movement. Jung often emphasized that the task of individuation, the journey toward wholeness, demands a balance, a dialogue between the inner and outer. Still, he respected the gifts of introversion deeply. In myths and religious traditions, the inward seeker often appears as the sage, the hermit, or the monk, figures who withdraw not from fear, but from devotion to inner truth. They remind us that without turning inward, humanity loses depth, reflection, and the power to question appearances. In a world that often demands constant activity and visibility, introverts embody the counterweight, the reminder that silence, thought, and solitude are just as essential as action. Think of the modern workplace, where extroverted traits, outspokenness, networking, constant collaboration, are often praised as the path to success. Jung would remind us that introverts offer something equally vital. They bring depth to decision-making, a careful weighing of possibilities, and the creativity that comes from hours of internal exploration. They may not always speak first, but when they do, it is often with insight that cuts to the heart of the matter. One could say that introverts live with their roots in the soil of the psyche. They draw nourishment from inner images, dreams, and reflections, and through them, they bring forth fruits for the outer world. They may not bloom loudly like wildflowers in the field, but they grow steady like trees, rooted deeply, quietly shaping the landscape of human thought. Jung's description of introversion was not meant to elevate it above extraversion, nor to excuse avoidance of life. It was, rather, an acknowledgement of an essential rhythm in human existence, the need for inwardness, for listening to the voice within. He saw in introverts the possibility of touching something eternal, a depth that cannot be found in external stimulation alone. As we move forward, we will turn our gaze outward, following the stream of extraversion, the bright energy that thrives on interaction, activity, and the living pulse of the world. If introversion is the well, extraversion is the river, rushing with movement and light. carrying its waters far and wide. Picture a lively festival in a town square. Music fills the air, colors flash across banners, and voices rise in laughter and song. For some, this scene is overwhelming, a tide of energy too great to absorb. For others, it is precisely where life feels most vivid. Extraversion, in Jung's understanding, is this outward flow of psychic energy, the river that surges toward the world rather than back into the self. Extroverts are often energized by what lies outside of them: people, events, conversations, and environments. The bustle of the city, the excitement of a crowded dinner table, or the challenge of a new project does not drain them, but rather replenishes their vitality. To engage with the world is to breathe. To withdraw is, for them, to suffocate. Imagine an extrovert entering the same dinner party where the introvert quietly began to fade. Instead of exhaustion, they feel their pulse quicken, their thoughts sharpen, and their mood rise. Each conversation is a spark, and the more sparks they collect, the brighter their inner fire becomes. For them, connection is not just social, it is existential. Without the presence of others, they feel cut off from the lifeblood that sustains them. Jung observed that extroverts orient themselves toward objects, situations, and people as primary sources of meaning. When they admire a painting, they marvel not only at how it moves them, but at its external qualities, its brushstrokes, its historical significance, its role in the gallery. Their attention leans outward, grounded in what exists beyond themselves. It is as if the world is a stage, and they are actors who feel most alive when the play is unfolding before an audience. But extraversion is not simply about being social. It is about the fundamental direction of psychic energy. Some extroverts may be bold leaders, drawing crowds with charisma. Others may be energetic adventurers, constantly seeking new places and sensations. Still others may be doers, thriving on practical work, collaboration, and external goals. What unites them is this orientation, the outward gaze, the leaning toward life outside the boundaries of the self. Consider the inventor Thomas Edison, who thrived on collaboration and the excitement of shared projects, often working with entire teams late into the night. Or consider Oprah Winfrey, whose vitality in connecting with audiences across the world has made her a cultural symbol of engagement. These are extroverted patterns, not superficial charm, but a genuine ability to gather energy from the world's flow. Yet Jung, ever the careful observer, also noted the dangers of imbalance. Just as the introvert risks being swallowed by their own inner world, the extrovert risks losing themselves in the flood of external demands. If one is too outwardly focused, the voice of the inner self can grow faint, drowned out by the constant noise of activity. The danger, Jung warned, is to confuse stimulation with meaning, to chase outer goals while neglecting the deeper roots of the psyche. Still, when balanced, extroverts bring essential gifts. They are often the ones who carry visions into action, who rally communities, and who bring warmth and vitality into relationships. They embody movement, growth, and expansion. Where the introvert contemplates, the extrovert enacts. Where the introvert guards the inner well, the extrovert opens the gates of the river. Humanity, Jung believed, needs both streams. Without the river's current, the well remains unseen. Without the well's depth, the river runs shallow. Think of the workplace again. While introverts may provide careful reflection, extroverts often ignite collaboration. They are the ones who can turn an idea into a meeting into a project, and a project into a shared accomplishment. They thrive on teamwork, seeing in others the mirror of their own energy. Their presence can be magnetic, not because they demand attention, but because they resonate with the life outside themselves. For Jung, the extrovert's gift was not merely social, it was symbolic. In myths and archetypes, the extrovert is the hero who leaves the village, seeking adventures in the outer world. They are the builders, the explorers, the ones who bring fire back from the mountain or treasures back from the sea. They embody the human spirit's yearning to engage with what lies beyond, to touch the wider world. Yet Jung never allowed his readers to romanticize one side over the other. The extrovert may appear vibrant, but without inner reflection, they risk becoming unmoored, carried along by tides they do not control. The introvert may appear quiet, but without external engagement, they risk suffocating in their own solitude. Each type needs its counterpart, and each individual must learn not only to live with their dominant attitude, but also to respect the shadow of the other within. If we think of humanity as a great conversation, the extroverts are the voices that speak, sing, and shout, while the introverts are the ears that listen, reflect, and respond with depth. Both are essential. Without the speaker, no story is told. Without the listener, no story is remembered. As we turn next to a vivid example, we will step into the everyday drama where these differences come alive. Imagine once more the crowded room, the dinner party, the gathering of people, and watch how the introvert and extrovert experience it not only differently, but almost as if they inhabit two separate worlds. The image is familiar to nearly everyone. A crowded room humming with conversation, laughter bouncing off the walls, music pulsing softly in the background. Plates clink, glasses sparkle, and everywhere people are mingling, exchanging stories, shaking hands, and forming little circles of energy. This is the perfect stage to see Jung's two attitudes in motion, not as abstract concepts, but as living realities shaping how people experience life. Picture the introvert stepping into this room. At first, there is curiosity and even excitement, faces to see, voices to hear, a sense of warmth in the atmosphere. Yet as the minutes pass, something begins to shift. The noise grows heavier, the flow of conversation more demanding. Each smile and handshake seems to pull energy outward, as though tiny threads are being tugged from within. The introvert may find a quiet corner, seeking refuge, or slip outside to breathe under the night sky. Their body is present in the crowd, but their soul longs for a return to the stillness where they can gather strength again. Now shift the lens. The extrovert enters the same room, and suddenly the whole space seems brighter. Energy flows toward them as naturally as sunlight toward an open flower. Conversations lift their spirits. Laughter sharpens their focus. Where the introvert feels threads being pulled, the extrovert feels cords being plugged in, a current charging them with vitality. Each new face is a new spark, each story a burst of fuel. By the time the evening ends, they are glowing, alive, eager for more. It is almost as though these two individuals inhabit parallel worlds, though they stand shoulder to shoulder in the same room. For one, the gathering drains. For the other, it sustains. And yet neither experience is wrong. Jung's genius was to name both as legitimate attitudes of the psyche, orientations of energy that simply flow in opposite directions. This example makes clear what Jung meant when he said introversion and extraversion are not surface-level traits. They are not about shyness or sociability, nor about being friendly or aloof. They are about where energy is directed, how the psyche draws nourishment. For the introvert, the source is the inner world. For the extrovert, it is the outer. Both sit at the same dinner table, but while one measures the weight of words within, the other finds delight in the very exchange itself. We might think of this difference in terms of music. Imagine two people listening to the same melody. The introvert is attuned to the silence between the notes, the subtle vibrations that linger after each sound. The extrovert is carried by the rhythm, tapping their foot, energized by the movement forward. The song is the same, but the experience diverges, shaped by the attitude of their energy. Jung often illustrated his ideas with myths, and we can see this duality reflected in ancient stories. In Greek myth, Hermes, the messenger god, embodies the extroverted spirit, darting between worlds, carrying news, engaging in endless activity. In contrast, Hestia, goddess of the hearth, symbolizes the introverted spirit, keeping the sacred fire burning within, hidden from the clamor of the marketplace. Both gods were essential to the community, just as both attitudes are essential to the psyche. The dinner party is a simple story, but it reveals profound truths. It explains why one child flourishes in a classroom, buzzing with group activities, while another thrives in a quiet corner with a book. It explains why some leaders inspire through grand speeches, while others influence quietly through careful reflection and strategy. And it explains why misunderstandings arise, why the extrovert may accuse the introvert of being distant, and the introvert may view the extrovert as shallow. Jung urged us not to mistake these differences for flaws. He believed much of human suffering arises when we deny our natural attitude or force ourselves into its opposite for too long. The introvert who constantly pretends to be extroverted will feel drained and hollow. The extrovert who isolates themselves in prolonged solitude will feel restless and starved. To live authentically, one must know their natural rhythm and honor it. Yet Jung also warned against extremes. He wrote that no one is purely introverted or purely extroverted. Such a person would not be human, but a caricature. The wise path is balance, learning to flow between both worlds. The introvert may need to step into the crowd at times, just as the extrovert must sometimes retreat into silence. Individuation, Jung's great theme, demands that we expand beyond our habitual patterns to embrace the other side as well. Returning to our crowded room, imagine the two individuals again. The introvert finding quiet meaning in a single deep conversation. The extrovert enlivened by dozens of fleeting exchanges. Each one walks away with a different kind of treasure. For the introvert, it may be an insight gleaned from a thoughtful remark. For the extrovert, it may be the joy of connection and laughter shared. Both leave having lived the same night, but having walked two different paths of the soul. This vivid example prepares us to explore Jung's most important clarification. Neither attitude is superior. Both hold equal weight, both contribute to the richness of humanity. In the next section, we will step into Jung's insistence on equality between introversion and extraversion, and why misunderstanding this point leads to needless judgment and conflict. It is tempting, when hearing about introversion and extraversion, to begin ranking them. To imagine one is wiser, deeper, or more effective than the other. Some might look at the quiet thinker and assume superiority in depth. Others might admire the confident speaker and grant superiority in influence. But Jung never made such a claim. For him, introversion and extraversion were not matters of better or worse, but of difference. Two orientations of energy, both necessary for the wholeness of humanity. Jung's insistence on equality between these attitudes was radical in his time. In early 20th century Europe, culture often celebrated extroverted qualities, sociability, public presence, and outward achievement. Those who preferred solitude were often mislabeled as shy, reclusive, or even unhealthy. Jung challenged this narrative, arguing that the inward stream of the introvert was just as essential as the outward current of the extrovert. He saw them as two sides of the same coin, each incomplete without the other. To understand his view, consider the cycle of day and night. The day, with its brightness, activity, and connection, resembles the extrovert's orientation. The night, with its silence, reflection, and hidden stars, resembles the introvert's. Which is better? Neither. Both are part of life's rhythm. If the world had only day, it would burn out in relentless light. If it had only night, it would collapse into endless shadow. Together they create balance, and it is this balance Jung valued above all. Think of communities. Every society needs its builders, leaders, and speakers, the extroverts who bring people together and move projects forward. But it also needs its dreamers, philosophers, and observers, the introverts who guard wisdom and guide direction. Remove one, and the other suffers. A group of only extroverts may rush into action without reflection. A group of only introverts may hesitate endlessly without movement. Together, they create both vision and momentum. Jung also reminded us that no single person is entirely one or the other. Within each extrovert lives a quiet inner voice, and within each introvert lies a spark that longs for outward expression. He spoke of the compensatory function. When one attitude dominates, the other remains hidden, pressing from the unconscious, waiting for acknowledgement. For instance, an extrovert who constantly pours energy into external life may one day be struck by a deep need for solitude. An introvert who lives only in inner worlds may suddenly feel restless for connection. The psyche demands balance, and ignoring one side can lead to crisis. This idea helps explain why many midlife experiences feel like upheavals. The man who has always thrived on external success may one day find his soul yearning for quiet reflection, meditation, or art. The woman who has lived in thought and solitude may suddenly crave community, travel, or new challenges. Jung would say this is not contradiction, but the hidden attitude calling for recognition, so the individual can grow toward wholeness. We see this balance reflected in history. Consider leaders who paired inner depth with outer action. Abraham Lincoln, often described as deeply reflective and melancholy, also stepped forward with public strength in times of crisis. Or Eleanor Roosevelt, who drew from her inward struggles to become a voice for justice and compassion on the world stage. These figures illustrate Jung's point. No attitude is complete on its own, but when balanced, they create a fuller humanity. Jung also warned against cultural bias. In some cultures, extraversion is praised. People are expected to be outgoing, assertive, always engaged. In others, introversion is valued. Silence, modesty, and contemplation are marks of virtue. But human nature is not bound by culture alone. Wherever we are, the psyche seeks expression in both directions. To overvalue one is to silence half the human spirit. This insistence on equality freed many from shame. Introverts, hearing Jung's words, could finally recognize that their preference for solitude was not weakness, but a valid attitude of the soul. Extroverts, likewise, could honor their hunger for engagement without guilt, seeing it not as superficiality, but as a genuine source of life. By naming both as equal, Jung offered people a language to accept themselves, and in doing so, laid the groundwork for modern personality psychology. The equality Jung described also extends to love and relationships. How many couples have struggled simply because one partner longs for quiet evenings while the other thrives on lively gatherings? Without understanding, such differences can appear as incompatibility. But Jung would say these contrasts are not obstacles, they are opportunities. When honored, they bring balance, allowing each partner to learn from the other. The extrovert draws the introvert outward into life, while the introvert invites the extrovert inward into reflection. In this dance, wholeness is born. So when we ask, which is better, introversion or extraversion? Jung's answer is clear. Neither. Both are threads woven into the tapestry of humanity. Each of us carries them, each culture reflects them, and the soul itself requires them. To choose one as superior is to miss the deeper truth, that life itself is movement between inner and outer, between solitude and connection, between the well and the river. As we continue, we step deeper into Jung's system, beyond attitudes into functions. For Jung, introversion and extraversion were not isolated ideas. They were the frame within which four great functions, thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition, took shape. It is here that his theory expanded, giving us a map of personality that would later inspire the MBTI. Imagine a compass with two directions already marked, one pointing inward, the other outward. Introversion and extraversion are these poles, but for Jung, the compass would remain incomplete without four essential functions that guide how we experience the world. These functions, thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition, are like the cardinal points of the psyche, each offering a unique way of interpreting reality. When combined with the attitudes of inward and outward, they form a dynamic system, a map of personality as complex as life itself. The first function, thinking, is the voice of logic and clarity. It asks, what is true? What makes sense? Thinking seeks order, categories, and structure. When paired with extraversion, thinking expresses itself through objective systems and external rules, like a scientist testing theories against the physical world. When paired with introversion, thinking becomes reflective and philosophical, weaving inner frameworks and personal theories of meaning. Both are thinking, yet one is outwardly anchored in facts, while the other is inwardly anchored in concepts. The second function, feeling, does not mean sentimentality. Jung was precise. Feeling is the function of value, the compass of what is important or meaningful. Feeling asks, what is worth choosing? What holds value for me? An extroverted feeling type may seek harmony with others, sensitive to social values and relationships. An introverted feeling type may hold quiet but powerful convictions, often invisible to others, guiding their life with an inner code of meaning. The third function, sensation, is the anchor to the physical, the tangible, the immediate. It answers, what is here, right now? What do I see, hear, taste, touch? Extroverted sensation thrives in the richness of the external world. Artists, explorers, and adventurers who immerse themselves in vivid experiences. Introverted sensation, by contrast, ties perception to memory and symbolism, experiencing the present through layers of association. A scent may call forth an entire past life. A sound may awaken deep personal imagery. The fourth function, intuition, is the dreamer of possibilities, the seer of patterns. It asks, what could be? What lies beneath the surface? Extroverted intuition dances among external opportunities, connecting ideas across the horizon, always chasing potential futures. Introverted intuition dives into the depths of the unconscious, perceiving hidden truths, images, and archetypes that lie beneath appearances. It was here that Jung himself most often dwelled, with visions that shaped his psychology. Together, these four functions created the structure of Jung's typology. And when paired with the two attitudes of introversion and extraversion, they multiplied into 8 possible orientations. Introverted thinking, extroverted thinking, introverted feeling, extroverted feeling, introverted sensation, extroverted sensation, introverted intuition, and extroverted intuition. Each combination formed a distinct style of relating to the world. like different instruments in the orchestra of the psyche. Jung did not see these functions as rigid categories. Rather, he saw them as living processes within each person, though one or two tend to dominate. A person might lead with extroverted feeling, always attuned to the emotions of others, while their introverted thinking remains hidden, emerging only in private reflection. Another might lead with introverted intuition, following inner visions, while their extroverted sensation erupts in bursts of action when needed. Life, in Jung's view, was not about being only one type, but about discovering the interplay of all functions. Guided by one's natural attitude, this vision was profound because it explained the richness of human difference. Two people could both be introverts, yet one might be an introverted thinker, absorbed in abstract systems, while the other might be an introverted feeler, guided by quiet moral conviction. Two extroverts might both thrive on the outside world, yet one seeks logic while the other seeks beauty. Jung's typology gave language to these subtleties, offering a way to see not just personality, but the soul's orientation. To see this in action, imagine once more our dinner party. The introverted thinker sits quietly, analyzing the dynamics of the room, forming theories in silence. The extroverted feeler moves gracefully between groups, ensuring everyone feels welcome. The extroverted sensor delights in the food, the music, the vivid details of the environment. The introverted intuitive gazes at the crowd as if watching a dream, sensing hidden stories beneath the surface. Same room, same moment, yet four entirely different worlds are being lived simultaneously. Jung was careful, however, to note that imbalance in these functions leads to distortion. Overemphasis on thinking can neglect the heart. Over-reliance on sensation can drown vision. Ignoring intuition can strip life of meaning, while ignoring sensation can cut us off from reality. Individuation, the path to wholeness, requires that we honor all four functions, even those that feel unnatural. The task is not to master all equally, but to acknowledge the neglected ones, to let them play their part in the inner orchestra. It is from this intricate framework that the seeds of the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI, would later grow. Isabel Briggs Myers and Catherine Cook Briggs expanded Jung's system into a practical tool, pairing introversion and extraversion with the four functions to create 16 personality types. Yet behind this modern system lies Jung's original insight, that human life is not one-dimensional, but shaped by the dialogue of attitudes and functions, inner and outer, head and heart, body and spirit. As we step forward, we will see how this framework, born in Jung's reflections, became the foundation for the MBTI, and how it continues to guide people in understanding themselves today. From the quiet depth of the introvert to the vibrant energy of the extrovert, from the clarity of thinking to the dream of intuition, Jung's map of the psyche remains a living guide. The journey of Jung's ideas did not end with psychological types. His system of attitudes and functions became the seed from which one of the most widely used personality frameworks in the modern world would grow: the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or MBTI. But long before MBTI became a cultural phenomenon, used in workplaces, classrooms, and even dating websites, it was Jung who first gave shape to the language of introversion, extraversion, and the four functions. Isabel Briggs Myers and her mother, Catherine Cook Briggs, were fascinated by Jung's work. Living in America during the mid-20th century, they saw how people often struggled to find the right careers, the right relationships, the right sense of belonging. They believed that if Jung's insights could be translated into a practical tool, individuals might better understand themselves and others. From their dedication emerged the MBTI, which added further refinements, like distinguishing between judging and perceiving preferences, to create 16 personality types. What Jung began as a map of psychic attitudes became, in their hands, a compass for everyday life. People could suddenly look at their results and see not only whether they leaned introvert or extrovert, but also whether they navigated the world primarily through sensation, intuition, thinking, or feeling. In a culture that often forced conformity, this tool offered permission to be oneself. An introverted intuitive could finally see their visionary tendencies as a gift rather than a flaw. An extroverted sensor could recognize their appetite for experience not as restlessness, but as a genuine mode of thriving. Yet Jung himself never designed his theory to become a neat labeling system. He warned against turning types into cages. For him, these categories were descriptive, not prescriptive. They pointed toward tendencies, not destinies. He believed the ultimate goal was individuation, the integration of all sides of the psyche into a fuller whole. The MBTI, while helpful, risks being misunderstood if taken as a fixed identity rather than a guide. Jung's voice reminds us that we are more than any one type, that the task is not simply to identify, but to grow. Still, his ideas gave people a language for difference. Before Jung, someone who preferred solitude might have been labeled antisocial, and someone who craved activity might have been judged shallow. With his framework, such differences could be understood as natural orientations of energy. This simple shift carried profound consequences. It replaced judgment with acceptance, confusion with clarity. Think of a workplace team. Without Jung's lens, tension arises easily. The extrovert pushes for brainstorming sessions, while the introvert longs for quiet analysis. The thinker insists on logic, while the feeler insists on values. Each assumes the other is wrong. But through Jung's system, each can be seen as holding a piece of the whole. The extrovert's energy ignites collaboration. The introvert's reflection deepens strategy. The thinker brings clarity. The feeler ensures humanity is not lost. Together, balance emerges. The influence extends beyond work. In personal relationships, Jung's ideas offer understanding instead of conflict. The spouse who cannot comprehend why their partner avoids parties may learn that introversion is not rejection, but simply a different way of restoring energy. The friend who wonders why someone always seeks new adventures may come to see it as the natural current of extraversion. When viewed through Jung's lens, difference becomes not a barrier, but an invitation to learn from one another. For Jung, this was not just psychology. It was philosophy, even spirituality. He believed the soul speaks through patterns, that each of us is called to honor the rhythm of our energy, to know whether we are introverted or extroverted, to understand whether we lean on thinking, feeling, sensation, or intuition, is not to trap ourselves in a category. It is to listen to the voice of the psyche, to honor the way life itself flows through us. And so we arrive at the final step, Jung's enduring message. Knowing whether you are introverted or extroverted is not about building walls, nor about comparing worth. It is about choosing environments that allow your soul to breathe, relationships that respect your rhythm, and work that aligns with your energy. It is about seeing others not as wrong for being different, but as carrying a mirror of what you lack. It is about balance, wholeness, and freedom. In closing, remember Jung's words. The world will ask you who you are, and if you do not know, the world will tell you. To know your attitude, to understand your functions, is the beginning of answering that question, not with borrowed voices, but with your own. Introvert or extrovert, thinker or feeler, sensor or intuitive, you are not bound by these terms. You are guided by them, invited to become more fully yourself. And so the true gift of Jung's theory is not classification, but liberation. For whether your soul finds life in the quiet well or the rushing river, the task is the same: to know yourself, to honor your path, and to walk it with integrity. As we conclude this journey through Jung's vision of introversion and extraversion, let us pause to reflect on what these ideas truly mean. Too often, personality discussions become games of categorization, simple labels tossed around as though they can capture the fullness of a human being. But for Jung, these terms were never prisons. They were doorways into deeper self-understanding, a way to describe the subtle rhythms of psychic energy that shape how we live. Introversion and extraversion are not enemies. They are two essential currents in the river of life. The introvert turns inward, finding meaning in solitude, reflection, and the quiet voice of the soul. The extrovert turns outward, finding vitality in connection, activity, and the bright pulse of the world. Neither is better. Neither is weaker. Both are necessary. Without the introvert's depth, life loses reflection. Without the extrovert's reach, life loses momentum. Together, they create the wholeness of human experience. The four functions, thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition, add layers to this dance. They remind us that there are many ways of knowing, valuing, sensing, and imagining. To favor one is natural. To integrate all is the work of individuation. Each of us is called not only to honor our strengths, but also to embrace our neglected sides, to become a fuller instrument in the great orchestra of the psyche. The MBTI, though popular today, is but a descendant of Jung's deeper vision. Its categories may help us recognize patterns, but Jung's message runs deeper. Do not cling to the label, but use it as a guide. The question is not, what type am I? But rather, how can I live in balance, honoring both the well within and the river without? And this is the heart of Jung's wisdom. To know yourself is not to limit yourself. It is to set yourself free. When you recognize your natural orientation, you can stop fighting it. The introvert no longer needs to feel guilty for needing quiet. The extrovert no longer needs to apologize for loving the crowd. Instead of shame, there is acceptance. Instead of comparison, there is peace. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." To discover whether you are introverted or extroverted, to recognize your functions, is one step on this lifelong journey. It is not the final answer, but it is a compass. It points toward the environments where you can flourish, the relationships where you can thrive, and the work where your soul feels alive. So let the world ask you who you are. Let it question. Let it press. And when you answer, let it be with the voice of someone who knows, not because you fit a box, but because you have listened to the rhythm of your own soul. Introvert or extrovert, thinker or dreamer, you are not defined by the label. You are defined by the freedom to walk your path authentically. Huang noi hai huang goai, hong ben now tot hon ben now. They are simply two ways that life itself breathes through us. And when you know which breath is yours, you can finally live in harmony, not only with the world around you, but with the soul within.